Hi and welcome everyone. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, Ms. Johanna Gusman. Ms. Gusman is a human rights lawyer and the NAACP Political Action Chair for Loudoun. She has been advocating for racial justice, environmental justice, common sense gun laws, LGBTQIA+ rights, economic justice, criminal justice, education equality, and quality healthcare. So all that good stuff. And today she will be discussing how to navigate the tricky subject of allyship and what we can do as non-Black individuals to be better allies for the Black community. Before we begin, I wanted to clarify that there's going to be about 10-15 minutes of question and answer at the end. It can go beyond if it needs to, but we have allotted time at the end for that. But in the meantime, you can go ahead and drop your questions as we go. But for now, you can go ahead and take it away, Johanna.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the wonderful organizers for inviting me into this space. And thank you all for being here as we do a crash course into allyship / accomplishship. I am going to just sort of do we'll have some quick discussion. I want to make sure there's time for questions and answers. And then we're going to end on an interesting kind of exercise that we can all do together that I have helped to put together with some of the Black organizers that I know and support here in the DMV area. But yes, I just want to start by saying I am by no means an expert on this issue. We are all here together learning. I simply want to share my own journey in anti-racism and hope that you can find it helpful as you embark on your own journeys in doing the work, in doing the hard work that exists. Now, a little bit about my background and sort of the experiences that I've had in organizing. I am a human rights lawyer. I have a background in health, a master's degree in biophysics and physiology. And, a lot of what I have done previous has been kind of on the international side of things. I am an international human rights lawyer, so that is the main type of law that I practice. And in my legal education, I had the great fortune of being able to go and work with the United Nations in Geneva as a human rights liaison, where we worked under the treaty monitoring body system, sort of like where all of the conventions and laws are created at the international level. And I was assigned to several different conventions, one being the elimination of discrimination of all forms. Gosh, I only speak in like acronyms, so excuse me. The CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination, all forms of discrimination against women, the CRC, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and then CERD, which is the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. And so I think I have quite a different kind of introduction into law in that way. I think the international side of things, there's a wonderful kind of definition of racial discrimination in that convention that is all, encompassing. It's essentially like any distinction, exclusion, restriction, or preference that's based on race, color, ethnic origin, nationality, etc. And so when you come at it from that side of things, you realize just how much of law and our interactions is, for lack of a better term, colored by our distinctions based on race. And so, a lot of the organizing that I do, as mentioned, I am the political action chair for the NAACP in Loudoun County. I do a lot of the legal observance and representation for protesters in the DMV area for Black Lives Matter marches and actions. Some of the best organizations that I have found and support, I suggest that you also follow: Freedom Fighters DC, the Palm Collective, They Them Collective, and then of course the NAACP. So that's just a bit of kind of the smattering of what I've been involved in. I also want to say I am wearing my Black Lives Matter t-shirt, but this isn't performative, because one of the best ways that you can prevent performative actions is to make sure that you are buying and supporting from Black-owned businesses. This is from the Heritage Treasures LLC in Loudoun County. So I highly suggest that you look and get any of your sort of protest gear from them. They're wonderful. And so I definitely had to plug them here. So in moving forward, one of the things, like I discussed, I am a scientist in my initial training before I went to law school. And so, you know, evidence-based factors mean a lot to me. Empirical facts mean a lot. And so when you look at America, when we dig deep as to kind of what communities are most affected by policing, most adversely affected by incarceration, housing discrimination, school segregation, you know, name it, and you will see that you land on the Black community being the most disenfranchised, not only historically due to the legacy of slavery, but, you know, that laws and policies were actually created specifically to exclude them. And so a lot of the organizing that needs to be done is along those lines and as that basis. And so when we look at the racial disparities, racial inequities, I think it's really important to understand that, especially in America, there is this sort of unspoken or overt idea that these disparities are not due to discrimination, but due to some sort of, you know, deficiency in a community or in the Black community. And part of doing anti-racist work is to understand that there is nothing, you know, right or wrong, inferior or superior for any race as an explanation for racial disparities. It's due specifically to discrimination. And so one of the things, and if you can only take a simple thing from this discussion, I hope that it's this, that fixing anti-Black racism in your own community is a prerequisite, is a precondition for taking part in the Black Lives Matter movement. That is how change happens. That is what you can bring to the movement. Is not that, you know, it is anything more than what you can physically do. If that community is your own family, if that community is your own heart, if that community is your neighborhood, your local organizing structure of Loud Now, of whatever it is that you identify with, that is like the core kind of work to be done. And when you show up and are present and you listen and learn, you will see amazing kinds of shifts begin to happen, where you can see and notice the kind of organic intersectionality that comes from this work. Right. So one of the things that I noticed in entering this space is like the overlapping injustices that can exist, right? That it is also Black trans lives matter, that when you're talking about gun violence prevention, there's a core of Black Lives Matter that is part of that, you know, the liberation of the Black community is tied to so many of these different issues. You know, ICE raids and stopping ICE, tying that to the policing and the deportation machinery that exists in the United States, the abolition of local law enforcement and what that means for actually increased investments in housing, in school, general investments in community. All of these things come about, you know, sort of the labor of social change requires the precision of understanding that it's Black Lives Matter that are at the heart of so many of these issues. But when you raise the profile of the most vulnerable, when you raise the profile of the most marginalized among us, as trite as that saying is, the rising tide lifts all boats, that's truly what it is that we are focusing on. That's truly what it is that will happen. And sort of the deeper the change and the deeper the relationships created in that space, then the easier it is to get to that kind of takeaway point of all lives can't matter until Black ones do. And that is so important, particularly in a country like America, where it was founded and built upon the white ownership and control over Black bodies. So when you have this clear articulation of Black struggle, and understand that the BLM, the Black Lives Matter movement, offers universal liberation across race and class against white supremacy, something that hurts everyone and harms everyone, against the ideas of U.S. world domination, whatever it may be, that really truly does matter. And it's really, really interesting to see kind of knee-jerk reactions that people have, or that you yourself have, to something that said like that is so an affront to the history that we learn, right? So I think one of the things that I have really taken away from listening and being in those spaces and understanding is, like, when something is uncomfortable to hear, dig into that. Figure out what it is, whether it's internal biases, whether it's going against and unlearning what it is that has been ingrained in us, or the embedded narrative that exists. I think that is really where so much growth and so much necessary hard work has to happen in order for there to be true change. I highly recommend They Them Collective is an organization here in DC, and every Saturday, every weekend, they have what they call a white accomplice training. And I have found that to be one of the best ones to break down those internal barriers and biases that people have, or the especially white community may have, in coming into this space. And it has done, I think, an incredible job at challenging that dominant narrative and centering Black voices, particularly Black trans voices, on what is necessary to really, like, make sure that this movement continues. And so if anything, I think it's important to follow people that are doing those kinds of hard work. So that is just sort of like a big smattering of a crash course in allyship. I like to call it accomplices, because it needs to extend beyond simple allyship and really go to accomplices, like doing the work that Black organizers need for people to make sure that this isn't a moment, but is truly a movement. And so I just want to end this portion on something that I read today. I highly recommend, if I were to be a teacher and give an assignment, this would be it. Ibram Kendi, he's like a very famous author with the Atlantic. He's also the founding director of the Center for Anti-Racist Research at Boston University. He wrote a thing that came out today called The End of Denial. It's in the Atlantic. And this part really spoke to me, and I think it speaks to kind of the impetus of what it means to be, an ally for Black voices, an accomplice for Black voices. And it goes like this: the heartbeat of racism is denial. Where there is suffering from racist policies, there are denials that those policies are racist. Where there is pain from racist ideas, there is this familiar refrain: I am not racist. If the heartbeat of racism is denial, the heartbeat of anti-racism is confession. Is to be anti-racist is to admit that we've done wrong so that we can begin to do right. Highly, highly recommend that you read the whole article, but I think that is a very, very key part of it, and something that every one of us can take away from this time. So I will leave it there for now. I know that I've looked in the chat and there have already been a few questions. So I want to open it up to everyone and make sure that I get it all. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. An equitable society for Black people will most likely be an equitable society for all. Absolutely. That's the major, should be easy to understand, but I think one of the things that I have heard that has been quite profound from Black organizers directly is really truly understanding like kind of the cognitive dissonance that one has to live with in America, but I guess simply in general, and that when you have power, whether you recognize it or not, right? You have power if you are a white American. So whether or not you even recognize it, you, especially people in power that are elected, right, and making laws and choices for people, whether it's intentional or unintentional, the adverse consequences that exist, part of the discomfort of stepping into this space is to understand that you, in order to be an ally, in order to be an accomplice, have to let go of having that power to make sure that you are amplifying Black voices, not your own, not your own ideals of what it means for Black liberation to happen. And that's often an unforeseen barrier that, or something that people need to come to terms with in answering it. Okay, I think there have been questions. Yes, okay, the name for the protest gear in Northern Virginia that I highly recommend, they're called Heritage Treasures, LLC. You can just simply Google them. It's who the NAACP has partnered with for our Black Lives Matter marches that we had all throughout June. It's where we get our t-shirts from. So I highly recommend that you check out their website and order directly from them. I've heard some say that we shouldn't refer to ourselves as allies, rather that the Black community give us that title. Absolutely. Do you agree or see harm in that? There can be some mixed opinions. So one of the things that I have learned through all of this too is that to be an ally, to be an accomplice, especially when it comes to this moment in particular, this movement in general, is that we are being invited into the space. We're being allowed into the space, in that, you know, like allyship, what have we had, 400 years of people being allies? That can only go so far, and that by defining Black liberation as somebody who's outside of the move of the community is, and in itself can be a harm, whether or not the intentions are good. And so I think what that does, not that, you know, people don't want people to be involved, you know, we need people on the streets constantly to continue to say these and do this work. But what it does is it helps to put you in check. It helps to stop what can be difficult or harmful kinds of co-opting of the movement that has unfortunately kind of been historical, particularly in white communities, assisting in these issues. And so one of the things, and we can get into this a little bit later after we answer some more questions, is kind of guidance questions that I have helped to collect among the different organizers that I know that where I asked, okay, I'm giving this thing, what is something that you would want to have included? And it's just a checklist of questions that everybody has that kind of helps to make sure that intentions are right and that the work that we do in allyship and accomplices is actually helpful. So I hope that answers that question. Have you connected with significant mutual aid networks? Yeah, La Colectiva is excellent. One of the really interesting things about kind of what has evolved through BLM via social media and whatnot are these mutual aid networks that do a lot to ensure that resources are shared among the collective. And I think there are some wonderful mutual aid networks. The ones that I know best are here in Washington, D.C. One of the best things that we can do too through things like this is amplify Black voices, find the Black organizers that are doing the hard work, follow them on the social medias, retweet, repost, whatever it is that they need, because that is one of the best ways to make sure that they get the help that they need. What have been some ways you have found effective in educating family members? That is a wonderful question, and I really appreciate it. I have an ambiguous ethnicity that can throw some people off. My father is Filipino Hawaiian, and my mother is of German descent. So she's blonde hair, blue eyed. She's also on this call. Hi, Mom. So if you saw my mom, you wouldn't be able to really tell that she's my mom unless you saw my dad. But I grew up in a very sort of sheltered and conservative household. And we've had this conversation in our family a lot. I think when you grow up mixed race, you can't escape what, race in general is like a defining part of your life. And in also growing up quite conservative, I had family members who voted for Trump, and a lot of, I think, this reckoning that America is dealing with right now, yes, brought on by catalysts like COVID that, really shows the inequities and inequalities that have existed for as long as we've known. But one of the things that it does is like, it's just so blatant, the racism, that I think it's kind of been a catalyst in and of itself, his, administration. And so one of the things that I think a lot of people have a hard time with is you can talk to strangers and say as much as you want, but it really is a whole other level when you need to speak with your own family about these issues, and you need to have tough discussions. And I have found that in hearing my parents' own descriptions of what it was like for them to date, that the white side of my family didn't accept my father until I was born, and they could see the beauty. Sorry, that sounds really conceited. I don't mean it, but like what it means to like mix cultures, mix ethnicities, mix backgrounds, like, that this is the future of America, that this is a wonderful thing, learning and coming together and things like that. And kind of being able to show that overlaced on society in broader ways or whatnot, and discussing why having an administration that says go back to your home or calls countries shitholes, all of these things we all know and have seen. It's the most important, I think, to have those tough conversations with the people where it's hardest to talk to, with your own family members, with your own friends. And yeah, it comes down to being intimately connected with Black communities. I have tried very hard not to rely on my Black friends, particular through all of this, being like, well, how should I feel about this, and what should you do about this? But to just actually, learn for yourself and do the hard work for yourself, because that's what we need. How should one be an ally when it comes to politics and supporting politicians? Excellent question. I'm so glad you asked this, Boyd. I am of 1000% one of the best ways, if the best way to save democracy in America right now is to elect Black women leaders. Talk about being among the most vulnerable, experiencing double, so many layers of discrimination, coming out with just incredible ways to lead and understanding the issues in such an intimate and intricate way. The people who are most marginalized, those who are most excluded, tend to be the best at inclusion and should be the ones to lead us in where we need to be going as a nation, as a community, at whatever level. And so we should all be really excited that this year marks the most Black women to run for Congress in our nation's history. That is a positive sign, I think. And just understand and take the lead from people like that who are at the top. I think, I have been very, very excited about Cori Bush's candidacy for a long time. There's some great articles around what it means to have a Black working class woman leading in that way. I highly recommend looking her up and reading her stuff as well. Talk more about what it looks like to start. Okay, that's a great one. I think there's been a lot that we've seen in social media and whatnot about, make sure you crack open white fragility, and all of these kinds of things. The literature that has existed for quite some time. I think, maybe it's my academic nature, but for sure reading Black authors is an excellent place to start in unlearning the behaviors and the thought patterns and the narrative that is ingrained in all of us having grown up in America. But I think kind of also making sure that you are connected with the right people, whether or not, it's a lot easier, I guess, with youth to be able to follow the right accounts on Instagram and Twitter or whatnot. But I think we tend to, follow the people with the most followers or the ones that are, but there are so many people doing the hard and good work on the ground in your local communities. And those are the people that you need to be connected to, right? I think probably everyone on this call knows Pastor Michelle. She's our president for the NAACP Loudoun. Following her lead is a great place to start. But I think one of the positives of social media is that you follow one person, they will suggest other people, or you just dive into people's profiles, see who they're retweeting, like this is part and parcel of going on this journey and understanding what it means to be anti-racist, is to take a deep dive and treat it like you would where it is that you get your news every day, what types of stories that your feed focuses on. And I will always go back to this. Black women leaders tend to have incredibly curated and wonderful content that really does a lot to educate and lift up people around you. I know a lot of people on this call doing the good hard work. Share it and uplift it and amplify it, because that's super, super important. Another great question. Thank you for putting up the Facebook for Heritage. I love that. How should we hold those running for office accountable on the issue? Excellent question. Again, I think this is, we're in an election year, the most important election of our lifetimes. And it is without a doubt a core question we need to be asking any official running for office or who is elected running for re-election. What is it that you are doing for the Black community? Not because you are catering to a vote, not because you are knowing that this BLM is a hashtag you need to use right now. It's like, what has your history been in voting for and helping that community specifically? And what are you going to do moving forward? Are you a proponent for defunding the police, demilitarizing the police? Are you a proponent for getting police out of schools and stopping the school to prison pipeline? What are you doing to invest directly into communities? What does healthcare look like to you? What does schooling look like to you? What does housing look like to you? One thing that I think Virginia especially needs to be good at understanding is housing. Of the top 10 cities with the highest eviction rates in America, Virginia has 5 of them: Chesapeake, Richmond, Norfolk, Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach. What do these 5 communities in Virginia have in common? This is the highest concentration of Black community in Virginia. Is this a coincidence? I don't think so. You know, it's like you just crack open a little bit, unravel it, and you'll see the, unignorable consequences of what policy has. And we need to ask our officials directly what they're doing for stopping evictions. Over the past few months, I found it disheartening that some of my friends have stayed silent. Absolutely. I've been incredibly disheartened by that as well. What can I do to get them involved? Is it my place or should I leave it alone? Absolutely, it is your place. That is one of the hard conversations to have. It's actually been really surprising to me, the friends that I've had who have been noticeably silent that I would not have thought, or ones that I can see struggling that are at least trying, right? We need to understand that we will make mistakes in this, but it means a lot more to be trying and make a mistake and being open to being corrected and led in the right direction than it means to be completely silent. This is not the time for silence like we are talking about right now. It is allyship and accomplishment that is needed. I think it's a really simple thing. You can kind of, message them. One thing that I've done that's helped and worked is getting a group message with some of my other friends that have not been silent, who know what they're doing, with maybe others who have not been so active, and posing a simple question like that, like, oh, have you guys seen this latest graphic from Black Lives Matter or whatever? What do you think of it? And then if they're still silent, even in the group chat, reach out to them directly. I think there is this fear of like, oh, I'm going to say or do something wrong, so I don't say anything at all. And that is not the time. We can do way more. And you simply being on a call like this means that you are starting and trying. And so bring them along with you. Because yeah, I think a lot of people just kind of don't know where to start, and we need to activate everybody. Johanna, can you share the nonpartisan work you're doing with Loudoun NAACP and how we can collaborate? Yes. Yeah, getting out the vote during a pandemic. Great question. So we are in Loudoun County also going to be organizing a march in October. It's called March to the Polls. It's where you can turn in a ballot. Nobody's checking who you're voting for. It's just getting people to vote and get excited about it. The voter registration, it's not a Democratic versus Republican thing. It's a lot about just registering people so that they can exercise their very basic right to vote. And it's especially about reaching out to the people who have a lot harder of a time doing that than most. And it's really difficult, of course, right now during COVID and everything, during a pandemic, it definitely creates interesting challenges that require creative solutions. And I think the more of us that can come together to do and figure out and brainstorm and find ways to help, the better. And so it really requires everybody being on board. And especially with COVID, where we have seen a huge downturn in registration comparative to, 2016, 2018 even. It is an all hands on deck approach for sure. And, yeah, I'm open to ideas as much as anyone, because, we're all in this together, and it is the most important thing. One of the things too is not only just like helping social media. One of the things about going to these kinds of marches and helping uplift and amplify Black voices is to also encourage people to run, encourage Black people to run for public office, because that is what we need. That's the kind of leadership we need. And I am excited moving forward with this. In talking about Black women, is there anything the NAACP is doing in terms of reproductive justice, given that the US has a rising maternal mortality rate? Yes, the worst maternal mortality rate is among Black women in America. It's triple that of white women. There's a massive intersection between race, gender, and class, absolutely. And just like I was saying before, when you really truly come to these issues with the ideal of Black Lives Matter, exactly what you said here, when we talk about reproductive justice, it needs to be centered on them. I think the reproductive rights movement has suffered a lot because of its lack of intersectionality on these issues, especially. And it has sort of been, this is a space that I do a lot of my activism in. I've been arrested outside of the Supreme Court specifically on this issue. And outside of senators' offices and whatnot. And it's sad because it has almost become a thing where women of color have stepped away from it because they feel so silenced among, a lot of the white women who lead that. And I think there's a lot of ground to be covered, and apologies, in all honesty, to be made. So yes, Jessica, if that is something you're interested in, I am happy to discuss with you and figuring out, even just starting the conversations that need to be had on this, and what can be done. There is nothing specifically in terms right now that NAACP Loudoun is doing through my committee that I know, since we're super focused on the election, but that doesn't mean that it's not something that I would want to take on and help create the community conversations that need to happen. How about efforts in getting frontline communities like the Black community out to early vote? We keep on having election issues, COVID concerns. Yes. How are we going around election day and getting people out to vote before then? Excellent question. I love how much, yes, we need to be focusing on voting so much. And one of the things that, for those of you who know, I was working on the Warren campaign throughout the state of Virginia, and it was incredibly frustrating to only be going to, Democratic meetings and seeing, older, very affluent, very white populations talking about these issues, but we're not reaching the population that really needs to be the most engaged, that we need to learn the most from. And so I think a lot is going to be needed around how to get the information out to those communities. And, I would say we have a lot to learn and a lot more creative to get. Like, what is it? Where can we go to make sure that populations that are typically left out are actually directly engaged? Are we doing it with language barriers in mind? How can we find different leaders at churches, at child care centers? I don't know, right? Like, this is all very difficult, COVID as well, but it doesn't mean that we stop there because it's a challenge. So like I said, if this is something that's really interesting to you, please visit naacploudoun.org and register to be on tonight's call at 7. It's going to be a short call from 7 to 8, and I have carved out a lot of time so that we can brainstorm these issues and come together on it, because I certainly don't have all the answers. It's going to require a lot of people coming together. just like you said, Barb, we need consistent, accurate messaging about how to vote in Virginia with no confusion. You know, the specific dates, everybody can vote early, get your ballots in before the 31st of October. We need, especially if you are young, we need poll workers so that we can ensure that places stay open on November 3rd. I understand that that can only, you know, kind of be done if you feel comfortable in this situation, but I think the average age of a poll worker in Virginia is in their 60s, and that is of course a high risk population for COVID. So we really do need youth to step up and make it spaces safe to vote. So that is definitely an immediate need. Thank you all so much for being a part of this and for asking such wonderful questions. I just wanted to end on some very basic questions that we can ask ourselves, whether it's before we go to an action, whether it's, yeah, I can put the link in this thing, whether it's before an action, whether it is who we amplify, in general, anything, in making sure that we are coming at it with the right perspective and making sure that what we're doing is helping and not harming, and to ensure that we truly are being an ally / accomplice to those that are doing the hard work. So it's a few very basic questions. One starts with, why are you present? And this is just to kind of really put into check what it is you're doing, right? Like, allyship is not about self-aggrandizement. It requires discomfort. You are not the star in the play. You know, a one-time action does not an ally make. You know, it's a sustained engagement, and you want to make sure that you're coming at it like what we were talking about, from that humbled and understanding viewpoint. What are you expecting? I think that kind of helps to make sure that what we are doing isn't performative, right? Like, I'm not going to this because I want an Instagram post that is going to get 100 likes and I get to check off that, like, I'm done this thing. Like, oftentimes what is most necessary is not going to be the easy picture you get to post. It isn't going to be that performative action. It's going to be, okay, show up. If I come from a state of privilege and can put my body in between a police officer and a Black organizer, or can, sorry, I'm on call also for legal stuff. Okay, then that is what you need to be realizing. Like, you aren't doing this to get thanked. You aren't doing this for recognition. It is a space that you are being invited in and need to follow Black organizers' leads on, because the fight for Black lives and Black livelihoods has real consequences, many of which we have the privilege of not seeing because we are not dealing with anti-Black racism directly. And then just like the very, very specifics are, is the person doing this action a Black organizer? Is, you know, is what they're doing, is what I'm doing going to silence Black voices or amplify it? This is a great graphic that I highly suggest people take a look at anytime before you do an action or do some kind of digital organizing. I think that is a great outline to make sure that what you're doing isn't performative, to make sure that what you're doing is helpful, and that you can just keep everything in check, so that we're actually supporting and doing the good work of, like, saying Black Lives Matter. Could you also touch base on how to take care of yourself? Yeah, it definitely requires finding people that you can come together with like this, finding people that can continue to support you as well, because it is definitely not easy work being an organizer. And so I think finding a community is incredibly helpful. If I didn't have the NAACP Loudon, I would not be able to do what I'm doing right now. And that is directly because I have a community, especially a community of color, who can continue to help keep me informed, keep me in check, and keep me educated. So yeah, engage young people, allies for Black voices. Exactly. Thank you all so much for inviting me to this space. It's truly an honor. And like I said, I hope that people can have learned something.
So thank you so much for being here today, Johanna. So all of her socials are going to be on the screen today, and our Remind is also going to be up on there. So if you want to stay up to date on things and know what our upcoming speakers are and stuff like that, be sure to sign up for that. Thank you again so much for being here today, Johanna. We absolutely loved having you. I know I learned so much, and we cannot thank you enough. Today's video is going to be up on our YouTube channel probably by tomorrow. So if you do want to watch today's session again, or you wanted to send it to somebody who you feel might need the education, which is definitely something we need a lot of now, make sure to check that out. We'll have it posted on the Instagram. The link is going to be in our Instagram bio, so be sure to check that out if you are interested. Lastly, if we can switch the slide over to our ways to help out. What's important is, I mean, Johanna, like you were saying, we treat this as a movement and not a moment. And so that means being involved in any way that you can. And sometimes it feels like little things like signing a petition or donating money here and there. It might feel like you're not doing enough, but it's these little things that really add up. And so it's so important that we're staying engaged and we're doing what we can. And so we've included some sources on this page. Check out these websites. Definitely make sure, sign a petition, donate where you can, make sure you're following these organizations, because every little thing that we can do is one step closer to making the world a better place. I hope everybody enjoyed, and I hope to see you all next week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, guys.